All right, these notes are going to go into your PBS course file. I am starting my notes on the first right-hand side page that I have that's available. I know this says page 11, but you don't necessarily have to worry about it being exactly page 11. The pages are going to be different in everybody's comp book. All right, so this has to do with PBS 113, and it has to do with hair evidence. Hair evidence, hair is composed of a lot of the protein keratin. Our nails and the outer layer of our skin, those cells also have a lot of keratin in them. We shed anywhere from 25 to 100 hairs a day. And so you cannot use hair to pinpoint a suspect with 100% certainty, but it can help to eliminate persons of interest and provide clues as to who might have been present at the scene. It's also good information where we can tell whether this is a human hair or an animal hair, and that can be used to add to evidence of the scene as well. So, hair evidence cannot pinpoint a suspect with 100% certainty, but it can eliminate and provide clues as to who might have been present at the scene. POI is my abbreviation for persons of interest. So how can we use hair as evidence? So we can use hair to identify. One of the ways that we can do that is by the anatomical construction of the hair. So the diameter of the hair, how thick the hair is one way we can use it to identify. The anatomical regions of the hair, and we'll look at those more here in just a minute, but the anatomical regions include the cortex, medulla, and cuticle, and they have specific patterns for specific people, so that can help us to identify. The growth cycle of the hair, we can also look at that here in just a minute in a little bit more in depth, but the growth cycle of the hair can also give us some clues and information as to the scene. If the hair has any sort of artificial treatment to it, that can help us link it to a person's of interest. So hair dye is something that we can see under a microscope. If a person has got a perm, if they add any chemicals, any oils, any sort of treatments to them, those are things that are going to be obvious that we can use to help pinpoint. And then finally, damage and disease can also be used to help us identify. So 2 examples. So Pili torti, my lovely little pronunciation guides here. So Pili torti, that's how we pronounce this. That's a disease where the hair is flat. Because that hair is flat instead of rounded, whenever it gets twisted, it makes it more brittle and is much more likely to break and fall out. And so people that have Pili torti have a tendency to have much shorter hair or have hair that does just visibly look damaged. Another example of a damage or disease is telogen effluvium. Telogen effluvium is when excess stress causes the hair to be in that telogen stage and stay in that telogen stage or advance to that telogen stage. And that's the stage where we shed our hair, and so it's going to cause hair loss. So I have this section, and notice this section on the left-hand side here. I have helped myself out using hair to identify. And then, of course, we have these bullet points here that I can easily take a look at and see. But we are going to take a look at a couple of those a little bit more closely. So we're going to look at anatomical regions and growth cycle. So this will probably be on the next page of your notes. All right, so here is information on the growth cycle, and this would have been on page 12 of my comp book. So the first thing that I did is I taped in my growth cycle insert. Then I gave myself a little heading out to the side so that it's easy to find and easy to see what I'm looking at. And then I have numbered the 3 stages that we are going to look at. We're going to look at anagen, catagen, and telogen. Then for those 3 phases that we are going to look at, I have taken notes and added information, including my pronunciation guide. Whenever I abbreviate terms, if that abbreviation does not make sense to you, then do not use it, because then you're going to be confused when you come back later on and you forget. You're not listening to my melodious voice as to what's going on. If the abbreviation does make sense to you, then by all means go ahead and use it. So for anagen lasts about 2 to 7 years. During anagen, the cells at the root are rapidly dividing. The hair is growing about 1 centimeter per month. So anagen is a growth phase. The cells at the roots are rapidly dividing. The hair is growing about 1 centimeter per month. The next phase is catagen. This is a transitional phase. The growth slows and then stops, and this phase lasts about 2 to 3 weeks. Finally is telogen. This is a resting stage. The follicle is completely inactive, so there is no growth, and this is the stage at which the hair sheds. We also mentioned that the anatomical regions of the hair can also be used in order to help identify. Those anatomical regions are the cortex, medulla, and cuticle. So I have my insert, but this time I did not tape it all the way down because I need a little bit more room. So I just taped it as a little door so I can get the information underneath. All right, so cortex, this is the pigment-containing region of our hair that has lots of granules in it. The density and the distribution of those pigment-containing granules can vary from person to person, and so it can help to identify race at times. So cortex gives hair its color. Pigments are deposited here. The cortex gives hair its color. Pigments are deposited here. So I have this labeled as cortex, so it's not this part because this is the medulla, and it's not the outside part because that's the cuticle. So the cortex is the colored portion of the hair. All right, medulla. This can be continuous, can be a solid continuous airspace. It can be fragmented. It might be absent. It might be thin or thick. But the medulla is the middle airspace of the hair, and it can be solid, broken, or missing. So medulla is the middle airspace of the hair. It can be solid, missing, or broken. And so here we have a very thick, very solid medulla. Here we have a somewhat thinner and discontinuous, it's sort of fragmented medulla. This hair has no medulla. The medulla is missing in that third hair. Finally, the cuticle is like the outermost layer of the hair. So there are cells that are flattened and kind of like scales or maybe roofing shingles that overlap, and they have specific patterns depending on whether it's got damage to it, or animals have different patterns to their cuticle, so that can help us to identify whether it's a human or animal hair. The outside layer, it can be smooth, rough, or have a pattern. And so if we have damage to the cuticle, that's going to be obvious as well and can help to identify. All right, next, and you can just put this on the top of page 13 because we'll do microscope magnification and biometrics, so that's just fine. So microscope magnification power, to make it nice and easy to find where that information is at. In order to find the magnification power of the microscope that you're using, you multiply the ocular times the objective. So ocular is what you're looking through, the objective is that lens that's on the nose piece. So ocular times objective gives magnification power. For example, if your ocular has a 10x or 10 times magnification power, and you're using the high power objective, which is 40x or 40 times, then that means you take the 10x ocular times the 40x objective, and you get 400x. That's the total magnification power. All right, finally, information on biometrics, and you can just put this on page 13 below the magnification power information. That's just fine. My comp book's just a little bit disorganized, but this will work. All right. What can be used to identify someone? So biometrics is one of the things that we can use to identify a person. Biometrics is a field of science that uses a person's unique characteristics to determine identity. I don't know why we're not focusing. There we go. Biometrics is a field of science that uses a person's unique characteristics to determine identity. The characteristics that can be used can be physiological identifiers. So for example, retinal patterns, facial features, DNA, fingerprints, those are all examples of physiological identifiers. Retinal patterns, facial features, DNA, and fingerprints. Or the identifying factors can be behavioral identifiers. So examples of behavioral identifiers are your voice patterns, your handwriting, your gait. So how you talk, how you write, gait is how you walk. Those things can also be used to identify.